Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Wire2Wire Sports Podcast. I am your handsome host with the fresh cut, Gene Walzak, the NFL genius. And in my upper left corner, see it worked, I mirrored the camera, is Kent State's own, Cleveland's own, College, Cuttrell. What's poppin'?
Look at you, getting it together for us.
Yeah, EA Sports in the game.
Only took 2.5 years.
That's it. That's all. Well, first of all, we haven't been going remote for 2.5 years, liar. I'm just kidding. In the upper right corner, we got Scholastic Shally, Uncle Shally, Mr. William Shallcross, going with the old government.
The old government name. Call me Weatherman now.
Yeah, no, definitely we could do that. We got a lot to get into this show, and we're going to tag as many people as humanly possible to get started. But we got the SEC, we got the NFL running backs list, and we got UFC 292 on the, which kind of a dud card, if I'm going to be completely honest with you guys.
Yeah.
Am I lying when I say that? Is it going to, you think it's going to be a good card?
No, I agree with you. That's why I said, yeah.
You got to be kidding me. That might be for the year, you know? It might be one of those ones that we got to really talk about for the whole year. We'll talk about that one near the end, obviously, but we got a lot to get into, the SEC. But before we do any of that, how are you guys feeling out there?
I feel lovely, you know. For those of you all that don't know, obviously it's fantasy football season. Got the number 2 pick in this upcoming draft here, so it's a great start to the day for sure.
It's a decent start to the day. You getting the number 2 pick is kind of suspect. The guy who pulled the names got the number 1 pick, but whatever. We're not gonna say anything about that. But we are all in the same. Finally, we're all in the same league together, which will be fun.
I mean, I'd be a little bitter too if I didn't get pick 3, you know. So I get it, Gene.
Look, I don't ever win. It's okay. I never win. Got to tag as many people as humanly possible. Cottrell, take it over. Talk to Bill for a minute before we get into the SEC.
Gotcha. Absolutely. So, well, Bill, this is that time of the year where we definitely get to come alive. College football season is here. Little SEC action today, and I got a feeling that this show right here is going to be one where none of us have the same championship game, and there's going to be people out there that start to comment like, "Are you guys crazy? Like, are you throwing in like, did you guys forget about certain teams, things like that?" And it's also crazy because this is the last year of the SEC as we know it.
It is the last year of the SEC as we know it. The SEC's going to be bigger and better and have all this crazy stuff. And I'm not going to lie to you, if I'm being honest with you, the other conferences aren't going to be as good. But Shally, what are your thoughts? SEC time.
I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit of maybe some surprise, maybe a whole lot, you know, kind of stays the same too. You know, I think one side is pretty obvious. I think the other side, I think you can make a compelling case for a couple teams. I'm on the record saying, you know, I'm not really for all this super conference crap, if I'm being completely honest. I think it's going to ruin college football. I think we're well on our way of doing that already. But I'm a traditionalist with pretty much everything. I would have loved, you know, I think if, you know, you're adding Texas and Oklahoma and it would have stopped there, and maybe like the Big Ten would have picked up Notre Dame, like something that made sense and stuff like that. I would have been okay with that. I mean, but to really look at the fact that now, you know, 2 years ago you had 5 major conferences, and after this year you're really down to 2.5. If we're being honest, you're gonna have the SEC, you're gonna have the Big Ten, the Pac-12 literally might not even be around in namesake anymore. The Big 12 is an absolute shell of itself. And at some point, I think the ACC is going to blow it up and they're going to join other conferences as well. So crazy time to be alive if you're a college football fan.
That it is. So let's get rolling. SEC breakdown. Cottrell, why don't you give us, you know what? I'm lying. We don't want to do this. Cottrell, I feel like I make you go first too much, and I don't want to do that. So I want you to pick the order tonight because you're always the one going first. So you pick the order and what you want to do, and we'll follow your lead.
So I mean, I'll go last here. Gene, you can go first. Bill second. And then I'll go last.
So I'll start with saying this. I don't think anybody's going to disagree when they say that the Georgia Bulldogs will be coming in from the eastern side of the SEC. I think we'll all have Georgia in the SEC East. If you guys don't have that, I'm highly disappointed in you, and that's okay. Where it comes down to me is, do you have LSU, Alabama, or A&M on the right side? That's the. And I looked at the schedules, and they all play each other at each other's homes. Nobody has the double road game essentially at LSU, at A&M, or at Bama. They don't have the double road games on those. What it came down to me was this: I hate Brian Kelly. I hate him. I can't stand him. But the returning quarterback, Jaden Daniels, and LSU, I really think that LSU – and the funny thing is this, right? I could be wrong immediately, right? If LSU goes out and loses to Florida State week 1, I'm wrong immediately. Like, I'm kind of screwed at that point because then they'd have to basically run through – I think they'll all have one loss in the SEC, and I think that LSU will end up being the team that makes it to the SEC championship from the West. I'll take LSU versus Georgia, and then give me Georgia to go to the Natty and to win the SEC and to be undefeated going into the Natty.
The only thing I'll say is the Florida State game really won't matter in the long term for LSU. They could lose that game, and it's not going to matter for the SEC. It could hurt them down the road come college football playoff time. But if they go out and lose week 1, it doesn't really do anything for your prediction one way or the other, unless they look awful. And then it's, are they really who we thought they are type thing. I'm going to get this one out of the way. Kind of like Gene said, I'm picking Georgia from the East. I think the biggest questions in Georgia are almost funny hypotheticals, if you're being honest. It's hard enough to win back-to-back. Can they go for a three-peat? Winning the college football player will start with winning the SEC for them, obviously, like it does every year. All roads to the SEC title leads at, they're going to lead through Athens, Georgia. That's where you're going to be. Even the ones you can street race on, no shot there, but that's fine. Kirby Smart now is at the point of he's in the same territory as Nick Saban, though. He's never going to be in a rebuilding phase ever again. He just reloads. He's just going to open the cupboards, take out, more 4 or 5-star kids, plug them into the lineup, get them experience during the year. And then by the end of the year, they're going to be, firing on all cylinders, and, they're going to go beat a bunch of people. They just have the better athletes at this point. The biggest question coming out of camp for them is who's going to replace Mr. 7-year starter Stetson Bennett. Everything I've read so far, it looks like it's going to be Carson Beck, another, previous 5-star kid. Looks like he's going to be under center when the year starts. We've all talked about numerous times, making that transition for them easier is going to be having Brock Bowers there, obviously, who is going to be probably a top 10 pick, top 15 pick in the draft next year. All everything, going to be All-American. The kid's a stud. They added 2 really good wide receivers from the transfer portal in Ra Thomas from Mississippi State and Dominic Lovett from Missouri. They're going to have weapons on the outside. They're going to be loaded. They're going to look like Georgia. So I'm not going to spend really any more time on Georgia. The defense is going to, I don't want to say going to have growing pains, but they have a lot to replace. We've looked at what they've lost the last 2 years, and as good as Georgia recruits, you're still replacing all-time great type guys at that school. So I think they'll have a couple games to get their feet wet and get ready. And by the time they hit the SEC schedule, I think Georgia's going to be just fine.
I think it's actually cute that you're talking yourself into Michigan possibly winning the national championship by saying all the things that Georgia needs to replace. It's cute, though. I appreciate it.
I couldn't have been any more of complimentary of Georgia than I just was in that statement. So I'm not quite sure what you're talking about.
So they got a lot to replace. We don't know who their starting quarterback's going to be. Listen, man, just say Georgia's going to win. That's it.
Georgia's going to win the East.
There we go. Let's say I need it. That's all I needed.
So the West, I think the West is a little bit more interesting. Mentioned LSU, Texas A&M, Alabama. What it boils down to me is I think A&M offensively just scares me. I just can't go out on a limb there and think they're going to beat any combination of LSU or Alabama. They have to go to LSU. I know they have Bama at home, and that's been a place of horrors for Nick Saban in the past. But I just think I just don't trust. I just don't trust Jimbo, and I'm eliminating A&M. So then it comes down to Brian Kelly or Nick Saban. I've still yet to see Brian Kelly win a game that mattered for his life in somebody else's stadium. Nick Saban has them at home. I think they're both probably going to come in with a loss or two, and I'm going to go with Alabama. I know this is a rarity. It's a rarity. You know, it's an Alabama team that probably has more questions than answers than it usually does. We have no idea who's going to start a quarterback. Have it be, you know, Tyler Buckner, or, you know, one of the 5-star kids in Ty Simpson, or Jalen Milton. It's still up in the air. He hasn't announced it yet. I think you're going to see a combination of all of them. I think it's going to take a little time for Tommy Rees to settle in and get that offense rolling the way Nick Saban wants it to. But that being said, I think when it's all said and done, other than A&M, every other big game they really has is at home. I'll take Nick at home against Tuscaloosa, against Brian Kelly or anybody else in that conference. So I'm going to go Georgia Bama in the finals, and I think Georgia wins their third straight SEC.
You went Georgia Bama. I went Georgia LSU. Go ahead, Cottrell. Tell me what you got. Show me what you got, College Cottrell.
So, I mean, I will agree with you guys. Georgia has the East, and it's not going to be relatively close. Talk about their question marks and Beck and things like that, the pieces they have to replace. That's all fine and dandy, but you also have to take a look at their schedule. Their schedule is lighter, especially to begin the season. They will have plenty of time to patch up those growing pains, if you want to say that they have those. And I think Georgia's going to be dominant as ever. And to be honest, I don't know if Georgia has a game this season where they win by less than double-digit points. I think Georgia runs through that SEC East, because I don't think there's anyone that's going to be able to contend on that side of the conference. You know, you talk about Tennessee and Joe Milton being there. Joe Milton, you know, is a highly touted prospect at Tennessee, and I understand that Tennessee had great players last year, but they also have a lot to replace. You know, their top 2 receivers went on to the NFL, and, you know, Hendon Hooker was a Heisman favorite. Joe Milton is a guy who couldn't win the job originally going down in Tennessee, and he lost his job at Michigan as well. So he has all the arm talent in the world, and I'm not saying he can't, you know, rebound from that, but I don't see Tennessee really contending on that side of the conference. Now on the other side, you got I'm the third different guy going, and I'm picking a third different team. I like Texas A&M to win the SEC West. You talk about their offense really worrying you. I think they got the best quarterback from last year's class in Connor Wegman, and he got to have some experience last year. You know, he really understood that Texas A&M offense, and Texas A&M had the opportunity to bring in Bobby Petrino to run their offense. So I think Texas A&M is going to be a much more well-oiled machine this upcoming year. Not to mention they added in Evan Stewart from that 2022 class, and they also brought in Jade Walker out of the transfer portal. So I think Texas A&M offense will be electric. And you got to remember, Texas A&M has 6 of the top 25 prospects from last year's class. So all those guys who were there last year, they got to learn under that system, be with Jimbo. Now they're another year older, going into their sophomore season. I think Texas A&M just has way too much talent, especially for a year that I really think Bama is down. I think Milton wins the quarterback job at Bama, and I see this as being a year where Bama loses 3 games, and they're not in the mix towards the end of the year. So I like Texas A&M to really just come out of nowhere, win that West. But ultimately, with all that said, I am rolling with Georgia to win the SEC as a whole, and I think Georgia submits their claim. They're going to be the number 1 seed going into the college football playoff, and, you know, there's going to really be no debate about it.
By the way, I want to shout out to everybody listening on TikTok. It's the first episode that we're live over on TikTok. We don't have the full stream there, but we do have the camera of me and the audio of everyone. So shout out to you guys on TikTok. Smack that like button for us. Let us know that you're listening. Let us know that you hear us. But let's get back to the SEC, back to what we were talking about. In the SEC East, what are the odds that you give Tennessee? We got a fellow Vols fan, Joseph Jeffers, in the chat. The game will be played at Rocky Top. It's the last game of the season, so if Joe Milton is ready, it'll be for that game. What are the odds Joe Milton and the Tennessee Vols can knock off Georgia in that game? And my other question would be, if they do knock them off in that game, will they have tripped up once or twice on the road to get there so the game wouldn't matter?
I don't think there's any scenario where the game doesn't matter. Like I know what you're saying in the long run, but even if Tennessee's sitting there at 9-2, like that place will be nuts for that game. I don't know if it'll have a college football playoff kind of implication, if that's what you meant. I'll give him 15%.
Okay.
If I had to give it a percent, I would say 5. I don't like this Tennessee Volunteers team this year. I get it. They came out of nowhere last year, and we had even talked about them and hyped them up on the show preseason and things like that. But I just think they lost too much, and they have to rebound from too much. And I saw Joe Milton be a starter, and again, I said that he can improve. It's been 3 years, where he's gone from Michigan all the way to now being Tennessee starter. But he's never shown me anything where I could say, hey, this guy has what it takes to win an SEC and beat a team like Georgia. So no matter how much, retooling Georgia has to do this year, even if Carson Beck isn't anything close to what Stetson was last year, I still think Georgia is, going to be the dominant team in this conference. And I don't think they struggle too much with Tennessee.
Listen, Joseph Jeffers said it very clear. He said Milton changed his throw motion. It looks great.
I get it.
Big Test will be in the swamp, though. He's right.
His throwing motion wasn't his biggest thing. He struggles with reading defenses. I watched it for 2 years in Michigan. If he matures mentally and he can slow the game down, the proverbial thing that we always talk about that good quarterbacks can do, then he's got a shot. But that's where he's got to be. He's a great athlete. He's one of those guys that if you pull up any of his 7-on-7 drills or scouting videos, stuff like that, he looks incredible. He's a freak of an athlete. He's got a cannon of an arm. It's a matter he throws the ball to the wrong team a lot, and that's his biggest weakness. And it's not just a accuracy thing. It's misreading and throwing the ball the wrong places. It's a lot of things. Kid has a great ceiling. He's got to get there for them to have a chance.
And I think the other thing too is that with that being Georgia's last game of the year, Georgia's going to have ample tape to study of Joe Milton to figure out, what he does well, what he doesn't do well, and how they're going to be able to attack him. I think Tennessee would have a better chance if it was earlier in the season where, Georgia didn't have too much to look at and didn't have too much to scout. So I just think that's a bad combination for everyone involved. And we saw the game last year. Look, I get it. Georgia's defense is completely different than where it was last year. A lot of those guys are in the NFL now, but I just don't see it going Tennessee's way this year.
Okay. So we basically are looking at Alabama, A&M, or LSU in the SEC West. Is there any other team in the SEC West that could win?
No, not out of the big three, no. I think Mississippi's going to be okay. I don't think they have what they need to compete with the big three, though. And I'll double down on what I said before. I think Georgia's the only team from the SEC that makes the playoff this year. Doesn't matter who wins the West. I think they're all going to have a loss or two, and that's going to be it. I don't think they have a shot at getting in.
I like what Joseph Jeffers says with South Carolina. I don't think they win the conference, but with Spencer Rattler being there and seeing the jump that he took towards the second half of the season, I do think they could be a good contender. The other team that I think can really come out of nowhere is Auburn. They weren't that good last year, and I still do have a lot of question marks on their team, but they really attacked the transfer portal hard. I think they finished with like a top three rating as far as, bringing in guys from the transfer portal. I think they got 8 or 9 4-star kids that had some experience playing. So I think Auburn can be a team that really comes out of nowhere and takes a jump compared to where they were at last year. But ultimately, I think it really comes down to A&M, LSU, and Bama.
Okay. Well, that'll do for the SEC. Anything else you guys want to add?
I just think it's a it is an absolute joke that Billy Napier is throwing Graham Mertz out there at Florida, seeing what he did at Wisconsin. I don't know how you bring in a quarterback Graham Mertz and you think that he's going to be the guy to change that organization around. So I think that's absolutely insane. And
You don't think that it could have been just poor coaching in Wisconsin? Wisconsin's not known for developing quarterbacks.
I get it, but I don't think there was anything out of Graham Mertz that showed me that he was that highly touted recruit. Like, regardless of how Wisconsin develops their quarterbacks, if you go out there and you play bad football, that's just, what you're going to do. I think Graham Mertz has all the athletic tools to be great, but he makes bad decisions. And, I don't think he has what it takes to be an SEC quarterback. And for Florida to put all their chips in on him, especially coming off of a quarterback like Anthony Richardson last year, who wasn't fully developed and things like that, I don't know how you can put yourself in that position again this upcoming season.
Okay. Anything else before we get to running backs list, Bill?
No, I mean, I'm reading Alex as the KJ Jefferson will ruin somebody's season. It's possible. I mean,
Yeah.
it's. I mean, again, he's a freak athlete. I think it's. Listen. I think Arkansas probably definitely wins a game that they're not supposed to. Like, again, that's the situation. Like, I don't know where A&M plays them, but that's a game where I got to see A&M going to Arkansas losing. Like, I think that's how the West is going to be this year. I think it's going to be weird. I think it's going to be really weird, very kind of up and down, chaotic year in the West versus where it's kind of Alabama dominates and there's one or two teams that have a shot to beat them, and that's it. I don't think we're going to have that type of year this year. I think the East is going to be very, very calm. I think it's going to be a Georgia show, and then I think the West is kind of chaotic.
All right, well, let's move on to the running backs list. I can't wait to get into this list. I think it's going to be a little bit of a wild list. Cottrell just said a minute ago, he said, and I found it very interesting. He said that I don't think any of us will have the same SEC championship list. I'm going to tell you this, without looking at the list, I don't think any of us are going to have the same 10 running backs. I don't think we'll have 8 of the same 10 running backs on the running back list. But I guess we'll see. Here's our top 10 running backs, Wire2Wire Sports Podcast. Let's look. I'm going to give it a quick look. Ooh, somebody else has Jahmyr Gibbs. I like it. Wow, we actually didn't do that bad. We didn't have that off of the list. Our top 4 across the board, our top 5 are identical. That never happens. No, they're not identical. Shally and me have swapped 3 and 4. It's okay. All right, let's get into it. We got a lot to talk about here. Cottrell, as usual, start us off with your number 10.
So, yeah, my number 10 is Travis Etienne. I think Travis Etienne is running back going into his sophomore year now in that Jacksonville system. Obviously, he has Trevor Lawrence as his quarterback, and, they have that familiarity being together at Clemson. Travis Etienne is coming off of a really good year last year, and I do think that his usage will go up, from even where it was at last year. I understand that they added Calvin Ridley in that offense, but I also think that Travis Etienne is just that kind of guy where he's going to catch more passes out of the backfield this year. And, it took him a little while to really get into his own last season, especially, those first 4 or 5 weeks. But I think this year he's going to be very comfortable in that offense, and they're going to really incorporate him to just be a big part of that team. So I like Travis Etienne coming in at number 10.
Number 9 for me, I got Aaron Jones from Green Bay. I think a guy coming off, a third consecutive 1,000-yard rushing year, had almost 1,200 yards last year, had 33 catches out of the backfield, which was a career high, and he did all that with splitting time with AJ still. So Green Bay is going to lean a little heavier on the run this year, obviously, especially trying to get Jordan Love comfortable at the beginning of the season. So I like Aaron Jones to put up another big year. I think he puts up numbers. I think he's underrated. I think he's a guy that never really got any kind of limelight there, playing behind, Aaron Rodgers and deservedly so probably. But I think he's going to have a little bit more chance to shine now. So I think he has another good year. I think he's over 1,000 yards. I think he scores a bunch of touchdowns. I think they incorporate him into the pass game even more. That's why he snuck on my list at number 10.
Okay. I'm going to make a bold prediction about Aaron Jones, the person you just spoke about. I think that he will be the second best running back on his team this year. So I don't have him anywhere near my top 10. I think he'll be the second best running back on his team. I think A.J. Dillon takes all, if not most, if not all of his work. I think he'll be the touchdown back. And I don't think Jordan Love is going to be very good at the check down passing to the running back position where Aaron Jones excels over A.J. Dillon. So just going to make that statement out loud. Najee Harris is my number 10. I wish I could put him higher. The reason I have Najee Harris number 10 is Najee Harris was on every one of our lists last year. And then he had a really bad year because he had a Liz Frank injury that he played through for Pittsburgh. Near the end of the year, he started looking like Najee Harris when he started getting a little healthier. Now he's fully healthy going into his third season. This is the season I think that him, Kenny Pickett, and that Pittsburgh offense really takes off. Everyone keeps penciling in the Pittsburgh Steelers as the bottom team in the AFC North. I don't think it's going to happen. I got news for you. I have some ridiculous predictions at the AFC North. But if I told you that the Baltimore Ravens are the worst team in that division, what would you think? I think smashing the under for the Baltimore Ravens is the move. And I think Pittsburgh's a lot better than people give him credit for this year. I got Najee Harris, number 10. Number 9, Javonte Williams. You won't see him on either one of these guys' lists. And I completely understand that. But Sean Payton is very running back friendly. And the reports of Javonte Williams is he looks like Adrian Peterson after ACL injury. I'm not saying that Javonte Williams is going to go out and run for 2,000 yards, but they're saying he's responded perfectly. The offense is going to look a lot better. I think Jerry Jeudy has a good year. I think Russell Wilson has a bounce back here. And I think Javonte Williams has a huge year with Sean Payton. Think about the running back. Think about Alvin Kamara and where he came from. Javonte Williams has the ability to step in and be an Alvin Kamara type like back for Denver. I think that if he can control his fumbling issues, which he had in the beginning of last year, I think Javonte Williams is in line for a huge season. So I have him number 9. Now, before Bill goes for his number 9, his number 8, and I just want to address a couple running backs that are notoriously not on my list. You see Josh Jacobs up there at number 7. I think Josh Jacobs is 100% a top 10 running back in football. Let me be clear about that. And people are going to have different opinions of this. I really am low on a lot of the running backs that are on franchise deals. They're on their franchise contract. He still hasn't shown up to minicamp not minicamp. He hasn't showed up to training camp for the Las Vegas Raiders. You never know when he's going to get there. I think Josh Jacobs has a huge fall off this year. And as you know, and Wayne, I'll get to your Cowboys comment. I don't hate the Cowboys. I do hate the Cowboys, but not for this. As you know, I have already told you, I think the Las Vegas Raiders are going to be the future destination for Caleb Williams. I think they're the worst team in football this year. So I just want to be clear when I say that. So I can't have Josh Jacobs up here if I think he's the worst team in football. Last but not least, Tony Pollard, not on my list. He's on both Guttrell and Shalley's list. I don't hate that. Well, I hate the Cowboys, but this is not a Tony Pollard hate list. I told you last year Tony Pollard was better than Zeke. I told you 2 years ago Tony Pollard is better than Zeke. What I will say about Tony Pollard is he's coming off an ACL injury, and I think that the fact that Deuce Vaughn's father is a coach on that team, and as good as he looks so far in the preseason, I think he's going to split targets. I think Tony Pollard being on a franchise deal for over in Dallas, I think if there's any injury, if there's any issue, Tony Pollard's going to miss some games. I don't feel like he's going to be 100% healthy this year. And if you look back at what Dallas has done in the past, they run running backs into the ground, and then they either pay them like they did Zeke or they get rid of them like DeMarco Murray. Tony Pollard being on a franchise contract, I don't think Dallas wants him to go for 1,500 yards. I think they'll be very limited with him. They're either going to try to re-sign him or they're going to move on from him. So I don't think they want the money to be that high. So I have Tony Pollard lower than most people because I think Deuce Vaughn has a very good year for them.
I'm going with Tony Pollard, number 9. And he's not coming off an ACL injury. He's coming off a fractured fibula injury. So the injury and the recoup time is not as serious as an ACL. Like Gene said, we have been talking about for 2 years how eventually they were just going to have to realize that he was the lead back in Dallas. And last year you finally saw it. Even though Zeke started all the games, towards the end of the year, Pollard was out touching him in almost every single game. Only had 180 carries, still went for over 1,000 yards, scored 9 touchdowns. Very good in the pass game with Dak as well, with screens and stuff like that. I think he's going to have a very good year. The only concern I have at all with him is them kind of easing him in at the beginning and not overworking him. So that's the only reason I have him number 9. I think Deuce Vaughn's going to be a great change of back pace. Deuce Vaughn is not an every down back in the NFL. He's not going to be a guy that's going to get 25 carries. I don't think he's going to take that much out of Tony Pollard. I think they're going to have sets for him, and he's definitely going to play. I probably average like 10 to 15 carries a game. I don't think it's going to be more than that. So that concern to me doesn't affect me putting Tony Pollard on my list. So I have him number 9. Again, he's even said himself that he feels faster than he did before the injury with the rest and all the rehab. So it's going to be interesting to see him play. I mean, it's Dallas, so I hope he doesn't have good games against us. I'm sure he will, but I definitely have him on my list. I definitely think he's a top 10 back this year.
Number 9 for me is a guy who I absolutely love this upcoming season, and that's Jahmyr Gibbs out in Detroit. I think to me it says a lot that Detroit was very comfortable with taking Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round and moving DeAndre Swift practically for nothing. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy who is compared to Alvin Kamara a lot, especially coming out of Bama. And you already hear so many reports coming out of that Lions camp about Jahmyr Gibbs getting lined up and getting receiver reps even when he's not out there in the backfield. So I think Jahmyr Gibbs in his rookie year is going to have a very, very high usage rate. And with him getting all those snaps, he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. So not only do I just love him for his stats this upcoming year, I think this is a guy that can potentially win you a fantasy league. If you can draft him ahead of his ADP, you get him like in the 3rd round. I think he has RB3, RB4 potential this upcoming year. So I love Jahmyr Gibbs, and 9 might even be a little bit low for him, but just got to go with the experience ahead of him. And speaking of experience, I got a guy 2 years ago who we're talking about as the best back in football, and I'm pretty sure he was number 1 on all of our lists last season, and Jonathan Taylor. The only reason why I have Jonathan Taylor this low is because there's so many issues and disputes with him, Jim Irsay, things like that. I don't know if he gets traded in the middle of the year. I don't know if he sits for a few games. There's just so much uncertainty there. But when Jonathan Taylor is on the field, he's a top 10 back, and he's much higher on this list than 8. So even with that uncertainty, I think whenever you get Jonathan Taylor on the field, if he plays 14 games, if he plays 13 games, he's going to end up being a top 10 back. And that's ultimately why I ended up putting him at 8. So I like Jonathan Taylor, and I wouldn't be surprised if he played the full season or if he got traded, if he ended up higher on the list.
So before you go, Shally, and I feel like you brought up the running backs list, Cottrell. You remember how I said last week, I said, I get a lot of these lists right. I do really well with a lot of these lists when we look back a year ago. My running backs list is not something that I'm proud of from last year. Just to be clear, I had Jonathan Taylor, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, DeAndre Swift as my first 4. All 4 you would consider bust last year. All 4. I had Eckler, Mixon, bust, Najee Harris, bust, Nick Chubb way too low at 8, Kamara bust, and then CMC at 10. So I had a terrible running backs list last year. So you should probably listen to Cottrell and Shally when it comes to the running backs, because my list was awful.
Number 8 for me, I'm going with Travis Etienne from Jacksonville. I think everybody can agree it's an offense and a team in general that's on the rise. Trevor Lawrence is going to be another year better. Travis Etienne is really only going into his 2nd year because he lost his entire first year to injury. He's got Doug Peterson down there who is great at using him in different spots, lining him up in different spots, getting him the ball. Very explosive runner. He's finally healthy. This is the kid that we saw in college that we all love. Got a coach now that's going to use him the right way. I think he's in a great year. I could easily see him finishing higher up this list. He was tied for the league lead last year with 40-yard plus rushes with Derrick Henry and Justin Fields. Tells you how bad that situation is in Chicago. But neither here nor there. I think he has another explosive year. I think he scores more this year. I think he's a top 5 or 6 running back when it's all said and done, probably fantasy-wise, because he's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. We've already talked about Ingram being, from the tight ends list, Ingram staying on the field and being healthy is big. And then we already brought up the other name earlier when Cottrell brought him up. They have Calvin Ridley now, who is absolutely has to have a good year to kind of get his name back in good graces and get his career back on track. So more weapons for Jacksonville, easier for Travis Etienne to probably touch the ball. So I think he has another big year down there in Florida. So I have him number 8.
So my number 8 and number 7 are cut from the same cloth. Fresh legs, man. When you have fresh legs in the NFL, I think so. Let me give you a little story on number 8. I don't think Jahmyr Gibbs was the best running back in this class. I don't think he was the second best running back in this class. I don't think he was the third best running back in this class. I think he walked into the best situation in this class. And the Detroit Lions have a very good offensive line. And I think what most people that are projecting the NFL draft, obviously, can we all admit that GMs are probably smarter than people like the Mel Kipers and the Todd McShays? They know what they're doing, these general managers. So when you look at that situation that happened in Detroit, I think that the general managers in the NFL are a year ahead or 2 years ahead of most people that do mock drafts and break this down. What NFL head coaches are trying to do is draft running backs early in the draft to get the 5th-year eligibility, be able to lock them up for the rookie contract and never really pay them. You can kind of see that. Like, that's essentially what's going on throughout the league. Detroit said to you, they said there were teams that were going to draft him. We were happy to get him at 12, right? We were happy to get him where we got him. They were jumping up and down in the room when they got Jahmyr Gibbs. They let Jamal Williams walk. DeAndre Swift's gone. They brought in David Montgomery to be their change of pace back. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be their 3-down guy. Guys, don't get it twisted. Detroit will run him into the ground next 2-3 years, and then they will discard of him. They will not pay him. And that's what's going to happen with running backs. Jahmyr Gibbs, how many touchdowns Jamal Williams had last year? 19. He lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be in line for that 3-down work. I think David Montgomery is just there to play a backup role. So I have Jahmyr Gibbs, number 8. My number 7 is Travis Etienne. We talked about Travis Etienne last year. That'd be his rookie year, essentially. His first 3 or 4 games, he was terrible. He was fumbling the football. He didn't really know what to do. When he got his sea legs underneath him in the middle of the season, he looked like the Travis Etienne that was drafted in the first round. He looked like Clemson's Travis Etienne. And, you mentioned the 40-yard runs. He's explosive, man. I'm not a huge fan of the Jaguars' offensive line, but he's quick, and he catches the ball out of the backfield, has a huge connection with Trevor Lawrence. I think him being number 7 might even be light. Travis Etienne's my number 7.
Number 7, I got Josh Jacobs from Las Vegas. Now, while I do agree the contract situation, the franchise tag is a little concerning. He is apparently working out and staying in shape. I just don't think he's going to report to camp until it's time to play. He knows the system. The system hasn't changed. This is the NFL's leading rusher last year. And I would say anytime you hold out of camp, it's always concerning as a fan or as a player or anything, because I think there is working out in your own shape and there's actually going through team drills and all that kind of stuff shape. I think they're different. That being said, this guy had a career year last year, and he's still young. I do agree with Gene. If you look at the model of what these teams are doing with the running backs, it's kind of in essence really what Las Vegas is doing with Josh Jacobs. That being said, if he plays this year on the tag, he's going to be a free agent next year. He'll only be 26. So I do think he has to report to camp. I do think he has to play because he is playing. If he's going to get another contract, he's going to get one more, and that's going to be it. He's got to go out and prove it again. I think Vegas started using him properly last year, and you saw the numbers pile up. It's first guy since 2014 to have over 1,500 yards rushing and 400 yards passing. So the kid proved last year that he could do it. I only have him number 7 because of the contract concern. I think by the CBA, I think he can sit out to like week 2 or something, and then he starts getting fined or something. So I think there's a shot he holds out a little bit longer than he should, but eventually I think he gets on the field. I think he has a productive year. And then I think he's going to give Vegas the old double bird on the way out of town because I don't think he ever goes back there. But I still think he's a top 10 back for this year. So I'm number 7.
Number 7 for me is Tony Pollard of the Dallas Cowboys. I think with Dallas getting rid of Zeke and just really giving the keys to Tony Pollard. I mean, I understand they got Deuce Vaughn, and Deuce Vaughn has looked great, but you got to remember that there was question marks about Deuce Vaughn even making the team. I get it, his dad is on the staff and things like that, but I think the Cowboys have shown in the past that they're very comfortable with Tony Pollard, and that's why they weren't afraid of cutting Zeke and even still paying him his money just to get out of town. So I think Tony Pollard will be a best friend of a guy like Dak. You think Dak wants to cut down the interceptions and things like that? I think that may mean more checkdowns, and that'll be more of Tony Pollard's wheelhouse. Now, with that said, just as a little spoiler alert here, I won't have Dak in my top 10 in next week's show, but I think Tony Pollard will have a very productive year. You saw what he could do with the split reps, still being 1,000-yard back, still putting up the touchdown numbers. I think him having his own show in Dallas, you will see Tony Pollard have a phenomenal year. So I like him coming in at number 7. Number 6 for me is a guy who very, very bold projection here. I know he's pretty high in a lot of fantasy rankings, things like that, but I like Bijan Robinson out in Atlanta. The Falcons last year ran the ball the most out of any other team in the NFL, 559 attempts. And I think Bijan Robinson going over there where they don't have a true, running back to compete with him for that starting spot, I think Bijan will have a ton of carries. Look, I get it. Algier really came out of nowhere last year, put up 1,000 yards. They still have Cordero Patterson, things like that. But I think Bijan Robinson will be their every down go-to back. Gene kind of touched on it a little bit earlier when he talked about Gibbs and ETN. Fresh legs are 100% a thing, and I think Atlanta is going to heavily rely on Bijan. And I actually think that Atlanta has a sneaky good offensive line as well. So I like Bijan Robinson to have a great rookie year. And, ultimately, I think there's a shot that Bijan comes out and wins Rookie of the Year. So I like Bijan at number 6.
Number 6, I have Jonathan Taylor from the Colts. He's probably the most curious, intriguing name on anybody's list. Me and Gene have him 6. Cottrell had him 8. Not really sure what to expect out of Indy. I think you look at last year, coming off an 1,800-yard year, crazy good year. Had an ankle injury that kind of nagged him for a while, tried to play through it, ended up missing 6 games, and played behind a very poor Indianapolis Colts line for the majority of the year, very below their standards. I think the line rebounds this year. Jonathan Taylor is still, depending on who you ask, between Jim Irsay, he's still rehabbing. Some of the coaching staff said he's good to go. He's just working from, away from the team. There's the whole contract dispute of him wanting to get moved now. I think it's a mess. But again, just like the guy below him, Josh Jacobs, I think when the season starts, I think he's going to be on the field. I think he's going to play. I think he has a good year. I do think the Colts line is better this year. I think Quentin Nelson and the boys their run block success rate will be higher. I don't think he puts up 1,800 yards. I think he's probably in the 1,300 to 1,400 yard range. They're going to need him, especially, they announced they're starting Anthony Richardson at QB. I think Indy's going to run the ball a ton. That's why he landed at number 6 for me.
Super interesting move for them to announce Anthony Richardson starting at QB after the worst preseason game ever. He's terrible, right? And we told you guys he was terrible, and he's going to be terrible this year, and the Colts are going to stink. And, to address Cottrell's comments about Bijan Robinson, guys, you're right. They have a decent offensive line. They're probably going to run the ball, and Bijan could have decent stats this year. But if there's bad throwing the balls, I think they're going to be. Teams are going to know that, and they're going to stack the box to slow down Bijan Robinson. I don't think they have a quarterback. And unless Taylor Heineke takes the starting job from Desmond Ridder, which he's probably not because everybody in Atlanta seems so sold on Desmond Ridder, they're going to stink too. I think Atlanta and Las Vegas are going to be the 2 teams fighting for Caleb Williams, not Arizona. That's my bold prediction this year. So if those teams are as bad as I think they are, they might start out the gate hot. Josh Jacobs or Bijan Robinson numbers might look good. But I think by week 11, they're packing it in. And you got to have an 18-week season. And if you don't have an 18-week season, you're not going to be on this list. We've seen that happen a million times. My number 6 is Jonathan Taylor. And the reason he's my number 6, you can ask Cottrell. Cottrell, you'll back me up on this. I was debating on not putting Jonathan Taylor on my list. And I remembered Shane Steichen as their head coach. And what Shane Steichen does with the running game, take you back to what Philadelphia did a couple years ago. Nick Sirianni came in. He wanted to throw the ball with Jalen Hurts first full year. And he's throwing the football, and the Eagles are not looking good. And then he passes off the play calling duties to Shane Steichen. Philadelphia Eagles start relying on that offensive line, power running, controlling the clock, and they got better. And then they did it in year 2, and the Philadelphia Eagles looked even better running the football. Well, he gets to walk into Jonathan Taylor in a decent offensive line with a rookie quarterback, kind of like Jalen Hurts. Just look at the situations. They are very similar. I think they rely heavily on Jonathan Taylor this year. I think Steichen gets the most out of him for what he can. I don't believe Jonathan Taylor will play every game this year. I think anytime he has a nagging ankle injury or a knee injury, he'll sit out. That's why I have him number 6. I think he only plays 14 games. I think he's very productive for the games he plays, but I don't think the Colts are very good, and I think he only plays 14 games. My number 5 is Austin Eckler. I didn't want to put him this high either. I love Austin Eckler. You guys know how big I am on him. Guy sees 100 targets at the running back position. He's going to catch 70 footballs. He's super durable. For everyone who talks about his injury, he might leave a game for a play or two, comes right back in the game. He doesn't miss many games. He had 20 and 19 touchdowns back-to-back season. He's very good around the goal line. He's a great pass-catching back. They don't run the ball that much in Los Angeles, so you're going to get your 800 yards rushing, your 800 yards receiving, and 1,600 yards should get you number 5 on your all-purpose yards with the amount of touchdowns that he has. I like Austin Eckler at number 5.
I got Austin Eckler at number 5 as well. I think the guy gets overlooked too much. I don't think he gets the respect that he deserves. And he's underappreciated, not by Chargers fans, obviously, but I think a lot of pundits and critics, you always see this guy way lower on lists than he is, have it be his size, or like Gene said, because he only rushes for like 700-800 yards a year. But then again, you have to factor in that the Chargers don't run the ball that much. They pass the ball. What other running back on this list, like Gene said, is going to have 100 targets, probably going to catch 75 to 80 balls. The man's got 38 touchdowns the last 2 years. That's 12 more than anybody in the NFL. Think about that. That's 12 more than anybody in the NFL. I think the guy just keeps putting up numbers. I don't think this year changes at all. His role in that team's not going to change. We hope this is the year the Chargers make a little bit of a jump, despite their coach. But I don't think anything changes for Austin Eckler. He's firmly implanted my top 5, and that's why I have him number 5.
I actually think, just to add to what you just said, and Cottrell's about to talk about it, I actually think Brandon Staley being there is irrelevant. I think that their offensive coordinator changed to not Jason Garrett. Oh my God, the name is
Kellen Moore.
Kellen Moore. I think that the offense coordinator change helps them out a ton. I just think Brandon Staley, as a head coach, is not going to have his team very prepared, and they're going to end up losing more games than they should. But I think the Kellen Moore move will actually help Austin Eckler.
I agree, and that's why I like Austin Eckler at 5 here. The one thing that kind of concerns me a little bit is, obviously with the franchise tag and all that being there, I do wonder if at some point are they going to start to phase Eckler out of the offense. Now, obviously with his explosion and things like that, he's always going to be a weapon when he's out there on the field. But you got to remember how Austin Eckler got this job. The Chargers started to phase out Melvin Gordon, and when Austin Eckler was ready, they just let Melvin Gordon walk out the door. And you really saw that changing of the guard take place. And I know there was different coaching styles, but you saw the same changing of the guard really happen in Philadelphia. All you guys in Philadelphia knew that Miles Sanders wasn't going to be back. But, once the playoffs really started hitting and, things really got down to the thick of it, you started to see, those backups really take over that backfield. And I almost wonder, is that going to be the case here with Eckler? I know he's no fool. He knows what's going on behind the scenes with his contract and things like that. So I'm sure if something were to happen and, he had some injury, he's not going to just play through it because he knows that he has a shot to get some money. And Austin Eckler is that tough guy, but I do think it's different when money's on the line, and especially for these running backs who have that shorter shelf life. You gotta really think about your future here. So Austin Eckler, for all that he's done and all that I think he will do, I have him at number 5, but that is the one thing that does scare me just a little bit.
Before you get in number 4, do you know the reason I still have him top 5? With the Philadelphia Eagles, they had a depth chart of running backs. Their running back room was Gainwell and Boston Scott. Like, they had a depth chart of running backs. They did. The Los Angeles Chargers are still trotting out Joshua Kelly as their backup running back. Are you out of your freaking mind? Who else are you going to play? They got Isaiah Driller and Spiller and Elijah Dotson. That's their running back room. It's just Austin Eckler. There's nobody else there. They all stink.
I get that, but they know you got to know Eckler's not going to be there next year, and one of those guys has to be ready. I mean, unless you know you're going to go out there and draft one. So I'm just saying, I think they might try to just dig and see what they could possibly find. Because, I mean, even thinking about, a situation like Dallas, Tony Pollard wasn't a household name when Zeke was getting all his love and things like that. So they might just try to find a diamond in the rough and realize that Austin Eckler isn't going to be here for the long haul. So that's just the one thing that kind of cautions me there. But I still think Austin Eckler's too great not to have in the top 5. Okay. And to just address Travis's point real quick, if you listen to anything that Gene had to say about Jonathan Taylor and not playing the full season and things like that, that's ultimately why I think he drops down to number 8. Uncertainty to start the year, and I do think if the Colts are out of it or anything like that, Jonathan Taylor will not be playing those last few games. So I just think it's going to be a lack of games, not necessarily lack of production, and that's why he comes in at number 8.
And I hear that.
Number 4 for me, Derrick Henry out in Tennessee. Derrick Henry is an absolute monster. And, we talked about him being on his decline and things like that. But Tennessee has a huge issue right now, and that's just so much uncertainty at the quarterback position. So another year of Tennessee Titans football, and it's going to be another year of relying on Derrick Henry to win you games. And, Derrick Henry has shown that in that division alone, he has the ability to put up, 200-yard games and things like that against those teams just in that division. I mean, he gets to see the Texans twice a year. So I think Derrick Henry is going to have a great productive season. And the nice thing is that he actually has some backs behind him now that can give him a little bit of a break. He has Hassan Haskins there, and he also has Tajay Spears there. So I think Tennessee will be able to alleviate some of that pressure, and you'll start to see a little bit more of a fresher Derrick Henry. So I think he has a phenomenal year.
You stole that right off my notes. I had Tajay Spears literally in my notes. So thank you. I'm just kidding.
I'm the college guy. Tajay was on my running backs list out of Tulane, so I had to show him some love.
Oh, I get it. So the guy that has Saquon number 4 and Derrick Henry over Saquon Barkley, let's hear why.
Number 4 for me, I have Saquon Barkley. I think after an amazing rookie year, then 2 years pretty much straight of just, major injuries and then nagging injuries. He finally got back to being healthy last year, and you saw why he was number 2 overall pick when he was drafted. Was tied for the league with Nick Chubb for explosive rushes last year at 18. And you look at the turnaround of the Giants. It's the first year they've had him on the field and healthy, and they were going the last 2 weeks, looking at a playoff spot. You look at Daniel Jones' numbers when he's on the field. He just makes everybody on that team better. He makes, shortcomings on the offensive line. He can make up for that. I think the biggest difference in his game last year, that was the way he ran. He didn't, some people criticized him earlier in his career for trying to go outside all the time. You watch how he ran last year. He didn't run like that. He stayed between the tackles. He took guys head on, ran a little bit more physical last year. As long as he can stay healthy, he's going to be the end-all, be-all for the New York Giants again this year. Everything starts and stops with Saquon Barkley. So I have a number 4. I went back and forth between him and Derrick Henry a lot. And I'll, when I get to Henry next, I will tell you why I ended up putting him number 3.
Well, I could probably help you with that. I think the Titans did a great job of revamping their offensive line. They signed Andre Dillard out of Philadelphia. They drafted Peter Skoronski, who was a left tackle that they moved to left guard, and that's perfect for him with his short arm issue that he had. That's the only knock on him coming out of college. I think them revamping their offensive line will do wonders for Derrick Henry. I think Ryan Tannehill starting the season and being a great play-action quarterback will also help Derrick Henry. I think the Titans are not going to be terrible. I really don't. They're only going to be terrible if they have to pass the ball to Malik Willis or Will Levis. If Ryan Tannehill plays this season out, I think the Titans are competing for the division. And why they do that, Derrick Henry is still a top 5 running back in football. The guy's the king for a reason. So he's my number 4, and that's where I have him. My number 3 is Saquon Barkley. I think Saquon Barkley is one of those guys that, all these running backs that are playing on the franchise tag, and we all disagreed with Saquon Barkley for signing the contract, but he doesn't seem like the type of guy that wants to sit out, that's not going to give 100%. And like, he's the only one I have up here out of those guys that are on the franchise tag that are, I don't think Saquon Barkley is going to sit games. I think that he's missed enough games in his career, and I think there's a lot of tread on the tires because he's missed so many games. Last year was his best season he had outside of his rookie year, and it looks like he's primed for another really good season. I don't like the Giants' depth at offensive line, but Saquon Barkley is the guy that's going to be getting a ton of touches, whether it be out of the backfield or between the tackles. So I think that Brian Dable's offense has shown you already that the New York Giants will rely heavily on Saquon Barkley. And I think Saquon Barkley has another great year at number 3. I just don't think the Giants win as many games as they did last year with a much tougher schedule. I have Saquon Barkley number 3.
To address Travis real quick, I will gladly put money on that if you would like to make a side wager on that. Saquon Barkley will have more rushing yards than Dalvin Cook will this year. There's a reason Dalvin Cook's not on anybody's list. Number 3, though, I have Derrick Henry. King. Oh, it's not a talent thing. King Henry from Tennessee. Gene just mentioned the one thing. They did revamp their offensive line this year. I put him in number 3 because I think Derrick Henry has another one of those crazy all-career years, and then you really start to see the decline. He's led the league in carries 3 of the last 4 years. I think we are starting to get a little bit lower on the tread than some of us would like to admit. But that being said, I mean, he's still putting up numbers. He had 888 yards last year after contact, which is second most in the NFL ever since they started keeping that stat. Physically, he's just an anomaly for a running back. He's just an enormous physical dude that plays the running back position. But that being said, we've all seen it with other backs before. Eventually, you just run out of carries, and the body just doesn't do what you want to do before. What you want it to do. Derrick Henry, I think this is his last great year. I think he goes out on top. And I do agree with Gene. I think Tennessee's going to compete. Houston's still going to be bad. Jacksonville's obviously going to be really good. And I don't think Indy's going to be good. So I think Tennessee, is fighting at the end of the year to sneak into the playoffs as long as Tannehill can stay upright. They do run great play action. Their defense is better than people think. And they start and go with Derrick Henry. So I think he gets all his touches this year. I think the big thing with him is, like Cottrell said earlier, I think when they don't have to force feed him, if they're winning or if they're behind, instead of trotting him out there, they can let Hassan Haskins run and stuff like that and try to keep them fresh later in the year. But I think Derrick Henry's top 5 in rushing again this year. That's why I have him number 3. I think this is his last great year.
Number 3 for me is Saquon Barkley. I think that with Saquon Barkley signing his 1-year deal and not necessarily playing on that franchise tag, I do think it's going to be a difference in attitude for him. I don't think he's going to approach the game the same way that these other guys playing on the franchise tag will, although it's basically the same situation. I do think Saquon Barkley is the kind of guy to go out there. He's going to play in these games, and even if the Giants are losing, as long as they're still not mathematically eliminated, I do think Saquon Barkley is going to be out there playing football. And, I think that's a big reason why he ultimately ended up signing that contract and really not even holding out for too long. Like, he didn't miss really any training camp or anything like that. So I think Saquon Barkley will have another phenomenal year. I think the Giants are going to lean on him yet again, because although they paid, Danny Dimes $40 million, I do think that they fully understand that offense only goes as Saquon Barkley goes. So I think Saquon gets a lot of love this year, and you see a very similar year this year as what you saw last year. Number 2 for me, Nick Chubb out of Cleveland. Nick Chubb has consistently been one of the best running backs in the league, if not the best back in the league. And I think now that he no longer has Kareem Hunt behind him and he doesn't have to split those carries, you are going to start to see some even crazier numbers for Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb was second last year in the league in rushing, and that was with, a lot less carries than what Josh Jacobs had. I do think with Deshaun Watson being there as well, he actually has a quarterback that I'm going to say puts a little bit of a different element on those defense, especially in the read option game. So that's going to help out Nick Chubb. And he also has luxury of running behind the second best offensive line in the league, right behind that Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. So I think Nick Chubb is going to be primed for another phenomenal year. You know, he's a guy that averages 5+ yards a carry every single year. And I think those carry numbers are going to go significantly up. So we're going to see one of those crazy years from Nick Chubb this upcoming year.
So for some of the reasons that Cottrell just mentioned, I strongly debated putting Chubb number one. I think not having Kareem Hunt behind him this year, I think his workload actually goes up a little bit. I think they were too concentrated on giving Kareem his, guaranteed 15 touches a game last year, and they had Chubb on the sideline sometimes when they really shouldn't have. You look at his numbers since he's come into the league. His yards per carry is the second best ever for any NFL running back that has 1,000 carries. The dude's a stud. He's got to, I don't know if the right word is improve in the passing game. I think Cleveland needs to start using him better in the passing game, make him more of a complete running back. Because honestly, to me, that's the only thing separating Nick Chubb and number one on my list. We're hoping. Well, I'm not hoping. I would be honest about it. I could give two shits. But I think Cleveland fans are hoping that Deshaun Watson has a better year this year and settles into the offense a little bit better, and it looks more like his Houston Texans self, minus the massage parlors. But I think Nick Chubb has another. I think Nick Chubb has another great year. The man is an absolute beast. I actually enjoy watching him play. I really do. So he's kind of old school for me. So Nick Chubb number two, and I will tell you. I mean, I don't know about you guys, so I'm not going to speak for you, but the margin between 1 and 2 for me is razor thin. I don't think it's if Cottrell would have came in here and had number one, I wouldn't have argued it. I'll put it that way.
I think Nick Chubb is the best runner of the football on this list. If you notice, my list is filled with people that can do both things. Najee Harris had a ton of catches last year. Javonte Williams can catch the ball out of the backfield. Jahmyr Gibbs, Travis Etienne, Jonathan Taylor, Austin Eckler. Derrick Henry is just a monster, which is why he sits here. Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey. Nick Chubb is the one running back on this list that doesn't really catch the ball out of the backfield, but I think that changes this year. I really believe that they put him in a position, and I agree with what Bill just said. I think that Nick Chubb's situation in Cleveland will be different. I think that they're trying to sell everybody in Cleveland that he can catch the ball out of the backfield. He won't have any issues with that. Look at Nick Chubb's career, though, throughout college. He's never really been a great pass-catching back. Now, headed into this season, I think this would be his 6th NFL season, a 6th.
Yep.
I think that Nick Chubb really is developing that pass catching ability. And I think what Bill said was absolutely correct, right? He's never had that 300 to 350 carry season. He's not been on that well. He's just run the ball ton per yards per carry. I think he gets to that 300 yards, 300 carries a season. And I think he runs the ball for 1,500 yards. I think when you run the ball for 1,500 yards, you're going to be a top 2 back. But my number one is just in the best system, right? Kyle Shanahan's got the best offensive system out of any coach in the NFL. It made Brock Purdy into a good quarterback last year. Christian McCaffrey is my number one, and I think that he'll be number one this year because of the system in which he's in. They have a zone blocking scheme that is perfect for him. He catches the ball out of the backfield. He's got a quarterback that's going to be a game manager that's going to check the ball down to him a ton. Christian McCaffrey is going to have a 2,000 all-purpose yards this year if he remains healthy, and he will be the number one running back in football. And I don't think it's very close. I think the gap between 1 and 2 is far greater than the gap between 2 and 3.
I'm Christian McCaffrey number one as well. I think one of the biggest things that benefit him is what Gene just mentioned. He plays on one of the best offensive teams in the league and in a scheme that fits him perfectly for one of the best offensive, if not the best offensive mind in the game. He's got 3 1,000-yard rushing, 700-yard receiving seasons in the NFL. The only person that ever has more is Marshall Faulk, and that's at 4. Just like Gene said, I fully expect him to tie that mark this year. He's in a very, very player-friendly. He's behind one of the best. He's top 5 offensive lines in the league. The biggest thing with him is when he didn't have numbers for a couple of years because he was hurt. He was on a couple of bad Panthers teams, but he was still putting up yardage. He just couldn't stay healthy. When he's healthy, you see what you get out of him. He's just that good. He's that good, and he's in. We always talk about how important fit is. This is another example of it. You put a great player in a perfect fit, you get just bonkers numbers, and that's what you're going to get out of Christian McCaffrey this year. So number one for me.
Yeah, number one for me, McCaffrey as well. I think you guys said it best. That fit it was like a glove, and that's why you saw when he originally got traded to San Fran, he was just an instant impact kind of guy. And I fully expect him to catch 100 balls out the backfield this year. And I do think he's going to have 2,000 all-purpose yards as well. I think he's going to have 1,000 yards in the passing game and 1,000 yards rushing the football as well. You talk about Kyle Shanahan, and Kyle Shanahan is one of those guys who just has that creative ability to, if McCaffrey's not out there in the backfield, he's going to have him out there on the field, lining up at receiver and things like that. And there might be snaps where you see a Deebo Samuel and McCaffrey together in the backfield running read options and things like that. So I think McCaffrey's going to have high usage. And the nice thing is you talked about his injuries and things like that in Carolina. He's going to be running behind a great offensive line led by Trent Williams. And you also have that luxury of playing, in San Francisco where you don't have too many cold weather games as well. So I love McCaffrey, him being in that system, being with Shanahan. I absolutely think he's in the best possible situation. And even before he got here, when he was in Carolina, if he was healthy, he was considered the best back in football. So being with Shanahan, being with that great offense, being in that scheme, there's no doubt about it to me. If Christian McCaffrey stays healthy, he will be the best back in football this upcoming year.
So Travis, what do you describe as a better, like, how are you defining a better season? Like, what is your criteria? How do you want to judge this?
Dalvin Cook, I know that's what you're alluding to. Dalvin Cook didn't make my list because he's going to be in the backfield with Breece Hall. I know they signed him to a 1-year deal. Dalvin Cook's probably going to get a lot of love at the beginning of the season, but splitting carries with a legit 3-down back like Breece Hall, who we saw have success with that Jets team, who we know is going to be the Jets' future, there's no doubt in my mind that Breece Hall will still be their bell cow back. And Dalvin Cook, it'll just be feet in the hot hand. So you may see games where Dalvin has 20-plus carries, but I think a lot of games you're also going to see games where Breece Hall has those 20-plus carries and Dalvin's at 8.
I agree. I'm not saying anything bad against Dalvin Cook. I'm literally making that argument because of all the reasons you just said. I love Dalvin Cook. He's been in the top 5 of my list since we started the show. I think the kid's crazy talented, but Saquon Barkley is going to touch the ball 25 times every game, at least. I don't think you can say that with any kind of confidence for Dalvin Cook because of Breece Hall, because of even Michael Carter-Williams there. There's going to be a lot of mouths to feed in New York this year. And oh, by the way, they have a quarterback that can throw the ball now, so they're not going to run the ball 50 times a game either.
Listen, let's talk about that. Pull the list down for a minute, and we'll talk about the NFL running backs that got signed this week. Ezekiel Elliott was signed. Listen, Cottrell is the centerpiece of the show, gentlemen. But Ezekiel Elliott signed a 1-year contract in New England. Dalvin Cook signed a 1-year contract in the Jets, and neither one of their Super Bowl odds changed one bit. Let me ask you guys a question. Who has a bigger impact this year, Ezekiel Elliott or Dalvin Cook?
I think it depends on what you describe as impact. I think if you look at the numbers, Dalvin Cook is going to have a more successful year. But in terms of impact, I do think Zeke is going to have more of an impact on that Patriots team because I think everybody there still understands that Ramondre Stevenson is going to be their every down back. But I think what Zeke brings to the table in pass pro and things like that, I think will be valuable for the Patriots. And I think Mac Jones might be a little bit more comfortable back there. The Patriots don't have the best receivers. They don't really have weapons and things like that. So I do think it will take Mac a little bit more time to get the ball out. And I think Zeke will have a great impact in the pass pro. But I do think everyone in New England is also very realistic and understanding that Ramondre is their bell cow. So numbers wise, I go Dalvin, but actual impact, I'm going to go with Zeke.
I don't think Ramondre is going to be their bell cow. I really believe that it'll be a 50-50 timeshare. I think that Ezekiel Elliott signed there for $6 million to be a timeshare. I don't think he signed there to be a backup running back to Ramondre Stevenson. I don't think Ramondre Stevenson is any bit as good. He's not going to play almost any third down, if I'm being honest with you. He's not a great pass catcher. And I think that Ezekiel Elliott's going to eat up a lot of the goal line touches too because he's so comfortable with holding the ball and scoring touchdowns. So I think it becomes a 50-50 timeshare. And God forbid if Ezekiel Elliott has a good season, 12 to 15 carries a game, to be able to keep his legs fresh and to not really use him as much as he was used in Dallas. I think that Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott are a 50-50 timeshare. I think with Dalvin Cook, he'll start as almost the starting running back with Breece Hall coming back. But I think by week 5 or 6, you're going to see Breece Hall being the complete bell cow there and Dalvin Cook being like a third down back, being like a backup running back role. I think that he'll have less than 10 carries in the majority of the games in the back half of the season. I really believe that. So I think Zeke will have a bigger impact in New England than Dalvin Cook will have in New York. And I think that when Breece Hall really gets rolling and really gets going, I think that he'll end up having full control of that backfield. Shall we?
I'm going to go with Cook. I don't necessarily disagree with some of the stuff you said, but we've all seen how Bill Belichick uses running backs too. I mean, he could use Zeke for 20 carries in a row for 3 weeks, and then he does one thing he doesn't like, and he'll barely play for 4 weeks. That's a Bill Belichick special. I do agree. He's 100% going to be the third down back and the goal line back, with the Patriots because of his pass pro. But I don't know. New England's so tough with running backs, man. It's nothing I'd want to hang my hat or absolutely bet on. I'm going to disagree a little bit with you on Dalvin Cook, though. I don't think either one of those guys ever turns into the 25 a game guy, but I don't think they brought Dalvin Cook either to sit there and be a third down back. I don't see that either. I think their timeshare is going to be very similar to what Zeke came out of last year in Dallas. I do agree with you. I think Dalvin Cook's going to be the starter, kind of in name only, like he'll be out there for the first series. But I think across the board, they're probably going to be close to 50-50 for the game. And like I said, he's on a Jets team now where they're not relying on running the ball because they have a quarterback that can throw the ball now. I still think Cook puts up better numbers than Zeke does. I think the most important thing for me too is he's just a better running back. He's in better shape. He's the better running back now at this point in their careers. And Zeke, Zeke is Zeke. I think he's going to score a lot of touchdowns. I think he'll get all the goal line work because of experience, like you said, with scoring and not fumbling and things of that nature, because those are the things that will absolutely put you in Bill Belichick's doghouse real quick. So I do agree he gets all that work. I just don't think he's going to get a lot of, I think Zeke's maxed out at like 20 touches a game. And I think that would be a lot. And I don't think you're going to see that a lot. Just my opinion. I just think Dalvin has a better year.
That's fair. And in most people's opinion, Dalvin Cook's going to have a better year. I think it's bold for me to say that. But I think if you took the first 6 weeks out of the season, I'd be willing to bet from week 7 on that Ezekiel Elliott has more carries than Dalvin Cook.
The one thing, too, with Dalvin Cook is, we haven't really addressed the elephant in the room, but at some point every year, Dalvin Cook's going to go down with an injury. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's happened every single season since he's been in the league. And I think depending on when that time happens for Dalvin this upcoming season, if you give Breece Hall the opportunity to play 3 straight weeks and be that bell cow, there might not be any looking back for him if he has that opportunity. I mean, you kind of saw it in Minnesota. They got a chance to look at Alexander Mattison in that backfield, and they realized that, hey, Madison can be our 3-down back, at least for the time being, until we find something better. So I think that is also one thing that really worries me about Dalvin Cook. Now, I do think he's going to be great in spurts with the Jets, but I mean, I don't see why you would bring in a guy on a 1-year deal who's on the back half of his career when you have a second-year running back who you drafted earlier on in the draft that is going to be your franchise back. So
that's a fun, bold prediction I have too. I don't think Alexander Mattison finishes as a top 32 running back in football this year. Not a top 10, not a top 20, not a top 30. I think he'll be – I think Alexander Madison's going to suck this year. I really believe that he's not prepared to be a number 1 running back. I think Alexander Madison will not be a top 32 running back this year.
They would have to do something completely drastic for. I just don't see numbers wise. I think he would just get too much love in the backfield to not be top 32.
I don't think he will. I really don't. I think he's already hurt. God.
No, I was going to say that. Like, I think there's a difference. Like, being the number one back for a 3 years or for a 3-week spurt while Dalvin Cook's out with a sprained ankle
Correct.
versus being the guy who's going to run the ball 25, 30 times a game for 17 straight weeks. That's a huge difference. I would hope the Jets, with having Breece Hall there, are going to try to limit the exposure to Dalvin possibly getting hurt with not giving him 30 carries a game, giving him 15 to 20 and keeping both of them fresh. I think that makes them a better football game. Now, that being said, Dalvin Cook is one, you have to admit it. You have to call, a spade a spade. I've had him on fantasy for too many damn times where, like Cottrell said, it's like clockwork. He's going to miss 3 games a year if he's out there for 25 carries a game. Cottrell's 100% right. He's done it, I think, like 4 years in a row. So it's, I think the Jets.
It was really clear last year that Dalvin Cook also lost a step too. Like, you can see it in his legs. You can see it in his speed. He 100% lost a step.
I think the only thing I would
I mean, I definitely agree with that. But I mean, he was still a top 10 talent-wise running back in the league last year.
Did you know that Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott are the exact same age? Can you imagine what the tread on the tire is for Ezekiel Elliott for what all those years that Dallas used him versus Dalvin Cook missing those games? Like, we all agree that Dalvin Cook has more tread on the tires than Ezekiel Elliott, right? And isn't that hilarious that they're exact same age, came out the same year?
It's funny. I just think the other thing is, I agree Dalvin looked a little, I guess, wary at the end of the year. But he also, at the end of the year, he was dealing with that shoulder injury where he said it was literally excruciating every time he got tackled, and he kept playing. So, you got to give the guy credit when it's
frail body though, Bill.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm saying he for a back, he's a smaller guy. He's skinny. He is. Frail's a great word for it. For a guy to take that type of punishment for 17 weeks a year, it's just not realistic. And I think the Jets are going to try to, wean him back. Instead of being 25 plus, he's going to be 15 to 20, and they could do that because they have another stud in the backfield with them. So it's I do agree. I think at this point in their career, I still think he's the better athlete, and he's definitely got more tread on his tires left than Zeke. You would talk about a guy who lost a step. There was times watching, Zeke hit the hole last year. It was painful. Like, the hole was there.
Not painful. It was exciting for me. I loved watching him hit the hole as slow as he was. Yeah. I was happy when Zeke was in the game versus Philadelphia. When Tony Pollard was in the game, I was worried about them breaking a run.
Yeah. The holes were there last year. He just couldn't get there. And Zeke's a little bit of a thicker guy. Like, he's always been a little bit of a bigger guy. And when you factor that in, with losing your legs, it's just, you lose that step and you lose that burst real fast. And he has.
Completely agree. Well, next week we have the 150th show and we have the quarterbacks list. How funny how that lands on the same shot. I'm looking forward to the quarterbacks list next week. We have the UFC to talk about, though. UFC 292 is this Saturday. And if I got to be honest with you guys, it's a very, very light card. It's a light card. So here's the card. It's sitting right in front of you. I think that this is them pushing Sean O'Malley quicker than they should. I understand why they're doing it. He got a gift win versus Peter Yan, and they're going to put him up against Aljamain Sterling. And this is the first time, I think, in my career of calling Aljamain Sterling fights that I'm clearly saying Aljamain Sterling is going to dominate a fight. But we'll get into that. We got to talk about the other fights leading up to this fight. Before we talk about the 3 main fights, Cottrell, what fight on the pre-card or on the the first 2 fights of the card are you most looking forward to? Is there anything that you look at when you see this card and you're like, okay, I really want to break down this fight?
It's not that I really want to break it down, but I do think Neil Magny going up against Ian Gary at the welterweight division is a fight to really keep an eye out on. Ian Gary is one of those guys in that division, in the 170 division, where he is undefeated right now, and he's really taken that slow ascension up. Neil Magny is going to be the best fighter that he's seen so far to date. So I do want to see how he looks out there against Neil Magny. And, Ian Gary, if you're more of a casual UFC guy, this is a name that, within the next year or two, you're going to start to see in those championship talks, if he can keep that 0 next to his name. So I am interested in that because I have followed Ian Gary for quite a while now. And with this being his biggest fight to date, I do want to see how that goes for him.
Well, that's one of the 3 fights that we're going to talk about. Bill, is there any fights on the undercard?
You got to talk about Cheeto and Pedro Munoz is the third fight on that.
Okay, that's fine. I thought they were the opener. I'm pretty sure they're the opener.
It's the other way.
Okay. So I think Ian Gary absolutely embarrasses Neil Magny. I've never been a Neil Magny guy. I think every time Neil Magny's walked into a situation that, and I just giving you my personal opinion, I think that Neil Magny has failed in every big opportunity he's been in. And I think that you said it perfectly. I think Ian Gary is ready for the prime time, and I think Ian Gary embarrasses him. So if I'm being honest with you, I love that fight too. Ian Gary, I just think, destroys Neil Magny. But let's talk about So, Bill, is there any fights not on the main card or on the undercard of the main card that you were really looking forward to?
I think the Garbrandt-Bautista fight will be exciting because I think there's no shot that fight goes the distance.
No, not at all.
I mean, so if you want to watch something, you want to get somebody, watch somebody get starched, it's probably going to be in that fight because Garbrandt either knocks somebody out or gets hit so hard his soul leaves his body for a couple seconds. I mean, that guy falls on his sword or wins a fight every time he's in the cage. And Batista's a kind of a high energy guy as well. So
hold on. I think Cody Garbrandt bailed on the fight earlier today.
What?
Yep. I'm pretty sure that Cody
Garbrandt
withdrawed from the fight.
Is that real? Is that for real?
I'm almost sure of it. I could somebody could look it up for me, but I'm almost sure Cody Garbrandt bailed on the fight and they already replaced him on the card. I think that they moved up Blackshear versus Bautista to the main card.
All right. Well, now I'm not excited about that fight anymore. I do agree with both of you. I think Gary wins the fight against Magny.
Yep.
Yep. That's crazy. I do think it's a good fight, but I do think Gary wins. Heard it camp. Probably doing something stupid.
Oh no, Gene, you were right. I don't know why they moved down. Cheeto and Pedro is the opener.
So they moved it down when they changed. Just to be clear,
yeah,
they moved it down when they changed the Cody Garbrandt fight, so they can open up with Cheeto Munoz. And I think they want to really highlight Ian Gary on this card. I think that's the whole point of it.
Well, originally it was supposed to be Cheeto going up against Henry Cejudo, but then Cejudo pulled out, and so they got Munoz to replace him.
So Cheeto Vera versus Munoz. Let's talk about that fight. Who do you guys got in that one?
I got Cheeto. I think Cheeto is in a different class than where Pedro is at. I do like Pedro as a fighter. He's been in some bangers. If you saw his fight against Dominic Cruz, it was a great fight. Pedro is one of those guys who has had the opportunity to face some of those heavy hitters, but seems like every time he goes up against those guys, he's on the wrong end of the slide there. So I like Cheeto in this one. I do think Cheeto is going to knock him out. I think it'll be a second round TKO for Cheeto.
I like Cheeto as well. I think Cottrell summed it up perfectly for me. I think Cheeto is still a guy that's kind of on the rise. And Munoz had a nice career. He's been in a bunch of bigger fights, kind of like Cottrell said. He hasn't won any of them, though. And I feel like he's kind of slowly on the decline. I think this is a good fight. I think it's an entertaining fight. I'll take Cheeto as well. I'll say third round stoppage, though.
Bob Tierney hopping in the chat. You want to talk about a guy that knows UFC, bro. You want to talk about – Bob, give your predictions for the card in the chat. This guy, hits every card. He's unstoppable with it. Oh, he's got it right here. He's got a Cheeto, Petrovsky, and Ian Gary parlay. I didn't even ask him for it. He already gave it. My man. Hey, listen, my man Junior. Cottrell upgraded his gear. I see you, bro. All right, so I think Cheeto wins this fight too. If Pedro Munoz wins this fight at 36 years old, I think the UFC wants Cheeto in the fight so bad. Pedro Munoz is on the last half of his career. He's getting a little long in the tooth, and I think Cheeto Vera overall wins the fight. So I'm with Cheeto Vera. Let's talk about the two main events: the World Strawweight Championship. My girl Zhang Wei Li is going against Amanda Lemos. Amanda Lemos, first of all, if you don't know, Amanda Lemos is a lot better fighter than a lot of people are giving her credit for in this fight. When you look at the odds on this fight, People are thinking Zhang Weili is going to run through Amanda Lemos. She will most certainly will not. I think where Zhang has the advantage would be on the ground. Amanda Lemos is not a very good submission fighter as a whole. She did beat Karate Hottie by submission, but that was off. That was off of a huge punch, and Karate Hottie fell, and then she basically gave up her back. But as a whole, Amanda Lemos will not be great on the ground. Her last fight, actually, that she lost was to Jessica Andrade, and Andrade subbed her. I think that this fight will be a lot more interesting than people are giving it credit for. So, Cottrell, let me ask you a question. What are the odds that you give Amanda Lemos of beating Zhang Weili?
25%. I don't think it's I gave her, a little bit over a puncher's chance. I do think this fight ultimately ends up to the ground, and that's Weili's wheelhouse. And I do think when it comes to striking, yes, Amanda Lemos is definitely slept on there, but you also have to realize that I think with somebody like Weili, the fact that she has that stand-up game, and right now she has all the confidence in the world. You saw her last couple performances. I do think right now she is just a different animal. And outside of her fights against Rose, she really has gone out there in the cage and just dominated. So I think we'll see what Weili can do, and I think she gets this fight to the ground if the waters ever get muddy.
I think her wrestling will really help her out versus Lemos. I really believe that. Bill, let me ask you a question. See, the thing about and they're different type of strikers, right? So when you're looking at Amanda Lemos versus Rose Namajunas, it's a different type of striker, right? Amanda will hit you with volume, multiple punches. She's a quicker puncher, whereas Rose can hit you with the knockout punch. And I think with Weili, she was very worried about that knockout after getting caught with that kick. She never knew where it was coming from. Where I don't think Amanda has that in her game. I really don't think that she has that one-hitter quitter style knockout power. Bill, let me ask you a question. What are your odds of Amanda Lemos taking out Zhang Weili?
I was going to say 25, but, Cottrell has just been a real bad habit the last couple of weeks of just stealing all of my answers to things. So I will go 27.5% for this fight. But no, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think a lot of people don't know her. She's not a household name. You do a little research and watch a couple of her fights, it's going to become evident very quickly that she's a very good fighter. She's solid. I kind of tend to fall back, though. Like, I feel like this is a fight where if Weili fights a smart fight and fights her fight, then I think she wins. Maybe not in spectacular fashion. It might not be the most exciting fight, but like Cottrell said, I think if we do get in any kind of icky, muddy water type thing, I think she's going to take it to the ground and score points with takedowns and things of that nature, and and she's probably going to win a decision. But she looked a lot better in her last fight. After coming back from kind of the shock knockout to Rose Thug. She looked confident. She looked more like herself again. So I think if she shows up and fights, a smart fight, I think Weili wins.
To be fair, that was the biggest mismatch I've ever seen in my entire life, because if Zhang Weili is fighting against Carla Esparza, she knows she's not going to get knocked out, and she's too strong to get subbed. I didn't think that I told you guys, Carla Esparza had no chance in that fight. Where someone as small like Rose Namajunas, Carla has a chance to be able to grab her back or be able to grapple with her. Yeah. Zhang Weili is just too good of a wrestler, and I don't think Carla ever had a chance. So, of course, she looked confident in that fight. I think Joanna was the bigger test when she knocked out Joanna in the second round and Joanna dropped the gloves in the ring. I think that's the fight that really stands out to me about her confidence, because that fight, Joanna has the striking ability to be able to hurt someone.
Especially knowing how the first matchup went, where they were in quite literally a street fight, and one of the best fights I've ever seen that the UFC put on. So I 100% agree with you, Gene. It definitely takes a lot knowing that you're getting in there with another monster in Joanna, and you go toe to toe with her, and you ultimately end up retiring her. So the confidence is back, and I think Weili. Honestly, I think Whaley Rose. I'm not saying Amanda's a slouch, but I just think where she's at right now, she knows she has that striking ability and she can strike out there with the best of them, and she has that wrestling to fall back on. I think this is a decision win, but I think it's a very dominant decision. I think it's a 4-1, and there's never really a doubt.
I'll give Amanda Lemos a 35% chance of winning the fight. I will, and I think that she has a chance, and I think that she could win the fight by points. I think that she can outstrike if she can keep the fight off the ground. So I think that she can outstrike her, and I think striking points wise, I think Amanda Lemos is the better standing points striker. I think where Zhang Weili will probably win the fight will be by the wrestling and be able to take her down and put her on the mat. So I think Zhang Weili wins a 3-2 decision. I think it's not that close of a 3-2 decision, but I think it is a 3-2 decision. All right, let's move on to Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Aljamain Sterling. You guys have known I've been highly critical of Aljamain Sterling's title run. I think that he's walked into a couple situations that were highly favorable for him, and I think he could have lost 3 out of his last 5 fights. But here we are. We're sitting with Aljamain Sterling as the champion going against Sean O'Malley. I think Sean O'Malley is in for a rough night. I really believe that. I think Aljamain gets his hands on him and drags him down. And O'Malley has the body type that's really terrible for this. I think Aljamain Sterling can really wrap him up and really put him in a whole world of trouble. I think Aljamain by submission or decision is the easiest bet of the entire card. I don't think there's any chance that Sean O'Malley wins this fight, and I think that the plus 250 is a gift for anybody that wants to throw away money. So the overall card, when you're looking at it as a whole, you can see that Aljamain Sterling's minus 250 is a gift. Sean O'Malley's a plus 205. I don't think it's even close to that, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think this fight's more of a minus 450 plus 370 fight. I give Amanda Lemos a much better chance of winning the fight versus Zhang Weili than Sean O'Malley over Aljamain Sterling. However, they have to still fight, and Sean O'Malley does have knockout power, and he can catch Aljamain Sterling. So with that being said, Cottrell, who do you got in the fight?
Yeah, so I mean, you said a lot of how I think, most people who watch UFC probably view the fight. You got the human backpack in Aljo, and you got Sean O'Malley, who has that knockout power, and the UFC, I'm sure, probably desperately want him to be champion. I do think this is a situation, though, where O'Malley being as big as he is, and we've seen him be in fights before where, the other person is a wrestler and that is threatened. He's just not as comfortable, and he hasn't been in the cage with a guy that has the wrestling ability that Aljo has. So I ultimately think Aljo does submit O'Malley. I think he subs him in the 3rd round, but you talk about O'Malley really not having a chance. I do think, to get O'Malley on the ground, you do have to get close to him. And I think if Aljo shoots the wrong way or anything like that, O'Malley can throw an overhand right that puts Aljo's lights out. So we've also seen issues in the past, again, in the original Peter Yan fight where Sterling was gassed a little bit. Now, O'Malley is not one of those guys to just push the pace and things like that, but I do think if that fight gets into the championship rounds and O'Malley does have just a little bit left in the tank and he can connect with one of those overhand rights, I think there's a chance you could see Aljo fall. But ultimately, I'm rolling with Aljo. I think it's going to be a 3rd round submission, and I do think that submission is most likely the way that this fight ends.
Charlie?
I'm rolling with Aljo too, just like both of you guys. I do think we're here under, a little bit of cloudy circumstances with Aljo, but I think you have to give him his credit too. The one thing I will say about him, I said it the last time he fought, he has looked better in the cage his last 2 fights. Like he looks like he's still improving. Between the two of them, I think he's definitely the better athlete. He's the more explosive athlete. And I think he's the stronger fighter. I think O'Malley is definitely the better striker and the better technical striker. But for what Aljo wants to do when he's the stronger, faster, quicker guy, it's not the best recipe for an O'Malley win. It's something that Like we said, puncher's chance. He's a very good striker. He's a very technical striker. He's accurate with his punches. Can we, does Aljamain have the chin to withstand if he gets popped and caught with one perfectly? Maybe we'll see. Maybe we won't. That being said, I think Aljamain is going to go in there, and I think there's no kind of hiding what his game plan is going to be. I think he's going to go in and like Cottrell said, he called him the human backpack. It's that name's out there for a reason. I think he takes him down. O'Malley, the last place O'Malley wants to be is on his back. In the cage. That is where he's most uncomfortable. He wants to stand and bang. I don't think Aljamain is going to let him do that for too long a period of time in any of these rounds. I think he loses by submission as well. I'll say 4th round, though.
Okay, so that's our UFC card for the night. Anything else that you guys want to discuss in the method of USC?
The one thing that I do want to kind of just bring up here, interesting to see Chris Weidman finally making his return from his fractured leg and things like that, going up against Brad Tavares. The other thing is that in that bantamweight division, Aljo, I fully expect him to win, but bantamweight's going to be in a murky spot if Aljo wins, because their clear number one contender is Merab, and Merab and Aljo are best friends. They've already said they're not going to fight each other. So I think bantamweight would be in a much better spot if O'Malley wins, but I just don't see that happening. So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
I got a question for you guys, because we've kind of talked about this before, but maybe not so much with the Aljamain situation, because I don't think anybody thinks he's going to hold the belt for years to come. But let's say if Khabib was still champ, and and you were the number one contender, and you were in his camp, at what point, what would it take for you guys to be I know it's my teammate, but I want to fight for a belt. I'm not going to be young forever. I got to put all that aside, and I want my championship shot.
For me, it wouldn't take much. I would say, hey, you're the champion. I'm next up. We're going to fight. We're both going to make a ton of money. And then we're going to be friends afterwards. And one of us is going to be champion and one of us won't. And we're going to train and get back to what we were doing before. I don't see how – I personally don't understand why being friends changes that dynamic. I'm sure, these guys fight not necessarily people in their camp, but they fight guys they like all the time. I'm sure a ton of these guys have hung out together, things like that. So if you have something that I want and we're in the same profession, I see no issue with us competing to see who's better. And I wouldn't have any beef if I lost or if I won.
I completely agree with Cottrell. I don't understand why people in the same camp that are friends think they shouldn't fight each other. It's competing. It's like saying that Mike Trout and Bryce Harper are friends, but they don't want to play baseball against each other. I don't understand that fully. And Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy are friends, but they don't want to play golf together. It's just I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. I understand that fighting is different because you're physically harming someone or touching somebody, but at the end of the day, you guys are competing at the same sport at the same weight class. Why would you not want to compete for a title?
Right.
I completely agree with you.
I don't disagree at all with either, with anything either one of you said. It's just something, it's come up so many times where guys, are in camp and, have a number one or number two contender in the same gym. And it's always, I'm not going to fight that guy. I'm going to wait. And I just always think that's crazy to me.
I always find it funny to look at the men's pound for pound top rank rankings. So just for fun, without you guys looking it up, let's see how many of the top 10 you can get in order.
Well,
who do you think is number one pound for pound UFC?
John Jones.
Or John.
John Jones is tied for 1, but he's listed as 2.
Okay, so it's Volk.
Volk 1, John Jones 2. You guys got those 2.
Okay.
Let's see how far you can go with it.
I would say Islam has to be next.
He is next. You're correct.
Is he?
Izzy's not next.
Number 4. Let's see. Go through the divisions. It has to be Aljo.
Aljo is behind Izzy.
Who else is 1? Oh, Leon.
I don't agree with that at all, which is why I waited for that one. But Leon is 4,
there.
Izzy's 5, Aljo's 6. So you have the top 6. Let's try to get 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 are all not champions.
Colby, Gaethje, they're probably both on there somewhere.
Gaethje's 13. Colby's not on there.
I would say Brandon Moreno's probably somewhere in there.
Brandon Moreno is number 15.
Okay. Charles Oliveira's for sure in there.
Number 7. You got it.
Charles.
Kamaru's probably still in there.
Kamaru's 8.
Oof.
Let's see. Then you got to go up probably a little bit. Cyril Gane's probably somewhere in there.
Nope, not even close.
Okay. That's somewhat surprising. You got a whole bunch of heavy hitters at 155. So
there's a couple guys at 205.
None of them are active, so they shouldn't be in the rankings. Oh, I guess you got Alex Pereira.
You also have a flyweight. You have the flyweight down here too.
Pereira, Pantoja.
Pantoja's 9, Pereira's 10, and Yuri is tied with Pereira 10.
See, Yuri shouldn't be in the rankings. He hasn't fought in a year.
I'm just telling you what it is. Number 12 is a 145.
Yair. No.
Yes.
Yair.
Not Yair. No, I'm sorry. It's Max Holloway. Number 14 is a 205.
Jamal Hill.
That's correct. You guys got them all. That's all of them. That's the top 15. Let's move on to You Got to Be Kidding Me, gentlemen. You better. Neither one of you guys better steal mine. I called mine already, and I have a whole breakdown of it.
Did you say it in the group already?
Yes,
yeah, you did. Well, I'm probably stealing Bill's again because that's just what I tend to do.
Oh, better not be.
So obviously there's still a lot more to come out to this story, but my You Got to Be Kidding Me this week is going to be the Tui family and Michael Orr.
What I was doing
about all this information that's come out. Michael Orr came out basically and said that he was never fully adopted by the Tui family, and that they have a conservatorship over him, and he really hasn't received pretty much any money from the blind side. Now, on the flip side of it, the Tui family saying that none of that's true, and he threatened to extort us for $15 million if we didn't just give him exactly what he wanted to have, and that they were going to have the whole story come out. Now, I think this story is very interesting because you had the instance when Michael Orr was in the NFL. He had been very adamant about hating the movie, about how it portrayed him and things like that. And so now to really just hear this behind the scenes workings of everything, and actually watch the report about it on Outside the Lines, that it is a fact that he was never officially adopted. And, the proceedings of the movie went to all the legal kids of the Tui family. So not saying he hasn't made any money off the movie, but, some of that report is actually factual. So just that whole situation, such a feel-good story, such a great movie. And now you get all this mess behind it this week for me. The Tui family, Michael Orr.
On, you gotta be kidding me.
Shally.
I think that's going to end up being a case of the truth is kind of in the middle somewhere. I think some of the stuff he said is very interesting, but then, they say they have emails and everything else. So, I mean, it's, I look at it, if it's strictly a money thing, I kind of get it. But if that's really not what you're after, then why even muddy the waters at all? You're dragging yourself into it. You're obviously going to drag them into it. And if everything he said is true, I mean, then they're scumbags. But
I do think it's interesting that,
I found it very interesting. Did you hear that SJ was on the Dave Portnoy podcast the other day?
I did not.
No.
And he's very friendly about Michael Orr. He's like, listen, he basically was very complimentary of him. Spoke very highly of him, said that, he nothing to do with the legal, what's being paid out between the movies, and that he still has a ton of love for Michael Orr and still considers him family.
I mean, they grew up like brothers, so I understand why they wouldn't necessarily have that beef. But
I would say I don't think he was probably privy to what his parents were doing either, if they were doing what Michael Orr said they were doing.
And I also do think it's very interesting that he was like if it all comes out to be that he was never actually adopted, then it's like, okay, then they knew from the start like this kid had high potential. Of course, they want him to go to Ole Miss, and you know that whole thing is true.
Because Michael Orr said like the biggest gripe he had with it was he's like, I really wasn't like that, like, you know, dumb. He's like, I wasn't that dumb. And he's like, and I wasn't that shy. He's like, I was even more at that age. I was still more of a, you know, an extrovert than introvert. He's like, and I was better at football. You know, he's like, I really wasn't starting from like square one, like they kind of portrayed in the movie. Those are like the three biggest gripes I've read over and over that he said he had with the movie. Other than that, he said it wasn't that bad. But I think his disdain for the whole thing, and maybe that makes sense now, you know, when you think about it, is because he feels like that movie was about his life and he didn't get paid for it. So,
yeah,
can't blame him. All right, well, this week I'm going with I Told You So. And when I say that, I mean the case of the awkward divorce and breakup and mess that is going to be James Harden and the Philadelphia 76ers. I've said it before, said it again. You know, this is obviously one of those situations where I wish I wasn't right. But James Harden's just going to show his true colors again. Zebras don't change their stripes overnight. He's not getting his way again. He's going to cause a bunch of disruptions, and he's going to try to force his way out of town now. Same old song and dance. He did it in Houston, did it in Brooklyn. He's going to do it to Philly now. Nothing's going to change. They tried to trade him. Everybody was offering was nowhere near what Daryl Morey wanted to accept for him. And now he's over, you know, at Adidas Summits calling Daryl Morey a liar, who, if anybody ever went to bat for James Harden and got James Harden more money than he probably deserved, it was Daryl Morey. So this is going to get ugly now. You got JoJo Embiid, you know, all pissed off now, apparently, behind the scenes. PJ Tucker said he's not going to play. I don't know what the hell that's even all about, because that guy's stealing money too. The whole dysfunction, the Sixers now, I'm just over it. But James Harden is just being the crybaby, you know, just babied superstar that he is, over and over and over again. This guy is who he is. It's time people just start believing what their eyes are seeing, and his actions continue to prove he is what he is. He's a 35-year-old guy on the back end of his career that thinks he's still LeBron James or Michael Jordan or whoever he thinks he is, and he's not. He's a guy that, you know, on the teams that he's played on are 1-9 in their last elimination games. He's averaging an assist per turnover at a 1-to-1 ratio, shooting under 25% from three-point land in those games. He's awful. He disappeared in the Sixers again for the playoffs this year. Had a great game, 1-4, 6-7. He looked like a high school player. He was terrible. And then this guy's got the gall to go out and blast his GM publicly when he knew the cameras were rolling. He doubled down and repeated it just to make sure everybody heard it, so he knew it would get on the news clips and get back on ESPN and everything else. I'm just tired of the guy. I knew we weren't going to win with him. He continues to be a guy that is more of a loser than a winner. I pray to God we get rid of him. So this week for me, James Harden just being a baby again.
Come on, you gotta be kidding me.
So I was really hesitant to do this because all the facts are not out on the case. And then about 10 hours ago, a second complaint came out. My you got to be kidding me this week is Wander Franco. Wander Franco Sunday was scratched from the lineup after a reported relationship with a 14-year-old girl went viral on Twitter. Or X, whatever you guys want to call it this week. By the way, Elon should be my you got to be kidding me, because he's really ruining that platform. I was all for him buying it, and he's destroying it.
I said that 9 months ago.
You were right. I was wrong. I get it. But Wander Franco now is facing a second allegation of an inappropriate relationship with a 17-year-old. Dominican Republic's Attorney General's office did not immediately respond to the request from Fox News. Franco was out of the lineup, and now he's away from the team on an exempt list. He has there's pictures with him with a 14-year-old girl, and now a 17-year-old girl is also reporting that he had an inappropriate relationship with her. He was paying. This is what mutually agreed on, hush money that they were paying, and he stopped making payments toward it, and they took it viral. Wander Franco is a professional baseball player for the Tampa Bay Rays, and anybody that has relationships with kids, I'm not going to be supportive of it all. All the facts have not been put out yet, but enough has been put out to where I'm going to use them as you got to be kidding me. They know enough about you, and they are young women to be used in this situation. So any professional ball player, any professional baseball player as a whole, any professional athlete, any human being should be very, very cautious around dating someone underage to begin with. 19 and 17, we've all seen that before, but 23 and 14, that's going way past the limit of where we need to be at in this situation. Wander Franco, the Tampa Bay Rays this week, and until we get more information, I don't have the full facts, but when there's smoke, there's fire. So for this week, it's Wander Franco.
Come on, you gotta be kidding me.
I think it will be nuts that you're possibly looking at a situation where you're looking at the guy who was the number one prospect in baseball for 2 years in a row, came up when he was 20, has shown all the glimpses that he is, everybody thought he is. Not only could he possibly go back home and go to jail, his baseball career will be over at the age of 23.
Yeah, he's 22. I apologize. He turned 23 in March. And apparently the relationship started 2.5 years ago. So if she's 14, maybe she was 14 when it started, but apparently it started 2.5 years ago. So more and more reports are coming out with it, but there's pictures with him and her online.
I have seen those.
And they're also, apparently there might be some things they're saying that she's 18 and she has a child. But if the relationship did start 2.5 years ago, that means that she was 16 when it happened. But there's a lot of bad things coming out about Wander Franco. And I'll pray that I'm wrong and that they're not true. But with situations like this, when there's smoke, there's fire.
And obviously, you never hope for the best or wish the best or anything like that. But regardless of what they had, it was an inappropriate relationship. Like, regardless of if they were just friends, whatever, like 23-year-old, 14-year-old, like 22-year-old, 14-year-old, like there's nothing that you guys should have in common where you're just hanging out together and things like that, like in that kind of setting. Like, I don't understand, why you would do something like that. So regardless of if not anything necessarily like criminal happened, it's still an inappropriate relationship that absolutely should not have happened. So no matter what facts come out, he's 100% on the hook for this. You got to be kidding me. So I'm with you 100%, Gene.
The only thing that can come out is if they didn't have a relationship and she turns out to be 18 and not 14. It's the only thing I can see. And I still don't think it's like, I don't know when she turns 18, right? Like, what if she was 17 or 16 when it started and she's 18 now? Regardless, the situation's a little sketchy. And for it being sketchy, I'd like to have all the facts before I really go in on them. But Wander Franco's earned this one. So,
and I just think it's crazy as the Rays organization as a whole. You lose your pitcher, your starting ace pitcher, Tommy John. Now you're going to lose the best hitter out your lineup. And obviously this story is much bigger than baseball, but just thinking about that Rays team as a whole, like they're in a much different spot than where they were at just a month and a half ago.
It's been a bad 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, any final comments tonight, boys? On Wire2Wire's final segment.
Looking forward to next week, man. Next week will be the fun, passionate show for sure. Quarterbacks list always gets a little dicey, and the Big Ten. I mean, can only imagine what conversations we'll have about that next week.
Yeah, and I think from where I stand right now with how I view the Big Ten, my Big Ten prediction is going to be very uncharacteristic.
Oh, get out of here. Don't. If you predict Michigan over Ohio State next week, I'm throwing you off the friggin' show. I'm throwing you. You can't do that. The 1 week you're allowed to be Homer Simpson.
I would never go on record like that of picking Michigan, but I'm just saying my outlook on how the Big Ten goes just might not be as expected. That's all I'm saying.
It's all reverse psychology shit. That's all this is. I can see right through this ploy already. I can see right through it. I already know because then he's going to force me to pick it because I didn't pick him again last year. He's going to force me to do it, and then it'll be, ooh, like lucky me, it didn't happen. I'm not buying any of this. None of it.
England. I'll answer that question for you.
Spain. I picked Spain. I said if anybody besides the U.S. win the World Cup, it's going to be Spain, and I'm sticking to that.
I'll be honest. I mean, I'm going the opposite way. Sorry, because I had England in the finals against the U.S. So I will go England as well. The U.S. coach just resigned, by the way. Not that we didn't see that coming, but
yeah, saw that coming from a mile away. It was 2 weeks too late.
Yeah, I would have made him fly back separately.
What is this NSC Messi thing that Joseph Jeffers keeps bringing up?
Nashville Soccer Club.
The championship for MLS.
Okay, so they're going against Miami, who Messi plays for?
Miami.
Yeah. Miami plays Nashville.
Okay. So who wins that game? And apparently the standing room tickets are $850 each.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
I don't know how you go against Messi.
Dog shit last night, but yeah.
I don't care, by the way. Messi scored a 40-footer last night in Philadelphia, and they cheered for him. Was that a playoff game?
It was a semifinal. It's a semifinal of what they're playing for on Saturday.
That's what you got to be kidding me, too. You watch your team lose to Messi, and you're cheering for the guy that scored against you.
Soccer's fickle that way.
Hey, that's why they're there. They look.
This is why grass ping pong sucks.
It's probably like 60% of people there who gave two shits about that game, but Messi was there, and they're like, "We're buying tickets. We got to see him play while he's stateside."
Cheapest ticket to last night's game was $350. I'm sure there was a lot of Union season ticket holders that probably sold their tickets for last night and probably made a bunch of money.
Grass ping pong, it's boring. Won't even watch it on TV.
Oh, real quick though, before we end the show, you saw a preview last night of what the WNBA finals will look like for the Commissioner's Cup, and you got the Vegas Aces versus the New York Liberty.
New York Liberty
lock that in now for your WNBA finals. There is no doubt about it. That's what it's going to end up being. They're the two best teams in WNBA, and I think you're going to be in for an absolute dogfight. Obviously, the Aces have been absolutely dominant all season, but the Liberty just have that talent with Sabrina and Breanna Stewart. So
didn't the Liberty beat them twice now?
It's 2-1. Yeah.
Well, the Aces, the last game that they played before this one, the Aces stomped them.
No. The Aces stomped them at home in the regular season. When they went to Liberty like a week and a half ago, Liberty won, and then they won again last night. It's the third time they've played this year.
I will say this. The Aces have the best team in women's basketball, but the Liberty are the only team that has the opportunity to upset them and beat them.
Well, me and Cottrell have competing futures bets on that, so it's going to be interesting to see how it goes.
Do you really? You have futures bet on the WNBA?
Hold on, timeout. He does. I don't. Is yours straight up though?
No.
Oh, so you did what I did?
Yeah, it's parlay.
Me and Brandon were sitting in the office one day, and I put like a wacky parlay, and mine's a 9-leg. It's like I showed it to Cottrell. It's like $25 to win like 14 grand. It's crazy, but the Aces winning the championship is one of my legs, and he has the Liberty winning his. So somebody's parlay is going.
That is complete opposite from what I would have thought you guys would have picked. I thought you would pick the Liberty and he would pick the Aces.
No, I got the Liberty. I got Liberty, 49ers, and Ohio State win the Natty in a three-leg parlay.
Well, we know he's picking Ohio State next week.
Mine's wacky, so I'm not even going into mine. Mine's crazy.
Stewie, Breanna Stewart.
Yeah.
Stud.
Who's a better basketball player, A'ja Wilson or Breanna Stewart? Your opinion?
Ooh.
Right now, I don't know how you. I mean,
that's tough.
I got to go Breanna Stewart.
I'm gonna go I'm gonna go Stewart as well. I'm gonna go Stewie.
I'm going Bree. I'm going Stewie.
I think she has the slightly more versatile game.
I will say this: I expected to get more hate on my WNBA conversation when I asked about how many teams did the New York Liberty beat. I do want to ask you guys this question on air because I responded to it already. Listen, we're gonna ask. We're gonna have some fun for a second. What level of men's basketball do you think the New York Liberty could beat? Division II? They're not beating. They're not beating any NBA team, right? We can agree on that.
No shot.
How about any college Division I team?
Who's the worst? Who's the worst D1 team?
Pepperdine.
I don't know.
San Francisco.
No, those teams are actually usually decent.
I don't know.
San Francisco made a tournament this year, I think.
Like the Detroit Mercy, or I think like Horizon, or.
So, what level of basketball?
This is where it gets hard because I like skill level wise, I still think they're there, but even Detroit Mercy is going to have
6'7", 6'8" guys that
and
are.
This is what I told you.
I looked it up.
They're still going to have a 6'10" dude that nobody on their team can cover.
I looked it up. The worst Division I team is Hartford of the D1 Independent League. They were 2-23 this past year.
Good Lord.
Did the New York Liberty beat Hartford?
Can you pull up the roster?
Sure, I'm pulling up right now. This is fun.
If they have anybody above 6'9",
if their center is their best player, then I'm taking Hartford.
All right, let's look it up. Statistics for the Hartford. Hey, listen, anybody want to guess what their team name is?
I was literally just thinking that. I was like, because I don't know it.
Probably
I'll say something stupid. I'll say no, it's not the Terriers. That's Boston.
Probably like the Jackets.
What?
Like the Jackets. They're Hartford Jackets.
The Hartford Doorknobs. That's what I'm going with.
The Hartford Hawks. How fun as you guys have. All right, so let's look at their leading rebounder. That's what I'll do. I'll just do it that way. Their leading rebounder is Pano. He's 6'8". He's 6'8", from College Point, New York. They have their second leading rebounder who starts for them is 6'8", and their third leading rebounder who starts for them is 6'4".
How are they with scoring? Those two big guys.
Let's see. They average 8, 8, and 10.
Oh, give me the Liberty. Give me the Liberty.
And what are their guards?
Take them out.
What are their guards?
Doesn't matter. They got Sabrina. Sabrina's locking shit down.
The leading scorer on their team was Briggs McLean, who's a 6'4" guard, a junior. He's averaged 14 points a game.
Bro, Stewie's going to give them buckets.
Briggs McLean. Like if that name doesn't scream, I grew up in Rich County, Connecticut. I don't know, it does.
He grew up in Martinsburg, West Virginia.
Briggs McLean. God almighty.
Briggs McLean and Michael Dunn was their second leading scorer. Who's also their second. He's from Manitowoc, New Jersey.
Briggs McLean. He's the love interest from the wrong. He's the love interest from the wrong side of the tracks in every awful fucking rom-com.
Briggs McLean. All right, so
we're hanging out with that Briggs McLean guy again.
So the best D2 team is probably better than the worst D1 team, right? We'd agree there.
Yeah.
So we're saying the worst D1 team or a middle of the road D2 team.
I think it sounds better D1 though. I mean, they are professionals. I mean, listen, you got to also look at it this way too. INSQ and Brianna Stewart and some of them, they've played pickup games against guys in their life, and probably held their own.
Facts. Vandersloot.
They're not opposed to competition. I say in one game, I don't know how it goes. If you're giving me a series a best out of 5, I'll take the Liberty.
Okay. I think if it's one game, I could see the Liberty winning, but if you're giving me a series, I'm taking Hartford. Just an opinion. But any final what?
Liberty sweep.
Wow.
Liberty sweep. 3-0.
Anybody else? Any other final comments?
Nope, that was it. That was fun though.
All right.
Nah,
Well,
good.
this is episode 149, Wire2Wire Sports Podcast. I am the NFL genius, Gene Walzak. That's College Cottrell. That's Uncle Shally, and we are signing out.